Welcome to the DAO Factor. I'm your host, Lisa Yu. I'm a crypto and tech investor, entrepreneur, and speaker that got into crypto in 2017. For those who are new to DAOs, a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization that's taking the world by storm. Today, I'm super excited to introduce to you our guest, Kelly Moran, founder of C3 Collective, made for creators, for collectors, and for culture. Their mission is to extend accessibility and drive opportunity in the new creator economy. They offer end-to-end launch support for creators interested in entering Web3 while providing unique, sustainable utility to collectors. First of all, Kelly, thank you for being on our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. What would you say you're most passionate about and what motivates you to wake up every day?
Oh man, already a big loaded question, and I am overwhelmed with passion in the space. So, at the most fundamental level, and what's really played out when kind of left to my own devices in the space is the actual pursuit of doing something for someone else as a profession and essentially establishing a model of social capitalism, if you will, and distributing value across value chains as this technology offers. So I got every dream job I ever wanted way faster than I thought I would. And then I would get there and not like it. I would feel unfulfilled. I got a private equity job right out of getting out of the military with no experience in private equity.
Oh, you're a former veteran. Thank you for your service.
I am, yeah. But all of those, so kind of, speaks to my perspective and my motivations in professions from the very beginning. But I was pretty lost, honestly, in what fulfilled me. And it wasn't that I didn't like taking direction. It wasn't that I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was very much the kind of work I was doing. And I can say that from a passion standpoint, and when I give classes or when I'm taught, I always get the response that my passion comes across very heavily in how I talk about the space.
Yes.
And that's because of, this broader space in general. I feel like I need to know as much as I can to a fault. Mm-hmm. And that's because I'm passionate about what the whole space offers. As we talk about NFTs and DAOs and DeFi, they all have to work together. And it's that from a technical perspective and from a human perspective, making that work makes me get up every morning.
Wow. What would you say are some of the highlights? What makes DeFi, NFTs, and DAOs so great?
Oh, I would say there's a lot that makes it great and a lot that makes it not for everyone. You hear too many success stories. I was just talking about this on a space. Too many success stories. And so if you're struggling, you feel like you're the only one, when really everyone is struggling. So there's a lot of tough times, and you do have to like pain to a certain extent. And I am a big fan of pain, apparently. What I like the most, besides how hard it is and how many problems there are to solve, because I just feed off of that.
Yeah, you're a problem solver.
Putting out dumpster fires is what I've done professionally before this and what I was the best at. And I think that what, this offers for these creatives, and that's if we're talking about, just the creator economy, which is where most of the experimenting is going on, but it affects every industry. And that's what's most exciting, is that the work we're doing now, not only, kind of brought to light passions inside myself that I didn't even know existed in the creative realm, but also are, tracking to disrupt every industry, right? The work we're doing from a technical perspective.
Centralize everything, tokenize everything.
Yeah, we're a long way from that, but everything will be token. I firmly agree that you will at any point be able to know the real-time value of everything that you own.
Yes.
Including things that aren't as tangible, which is kind of crazy. Identity, obviously you don't value identity, but that's something you own.
Like owning the data.
Yes. And I mean, that's owning the data is really, I think, the first step, and what makes people, one, it's really exciting. It's also a huge problem to solve. But what's really interesting about owning the data element is data is to some extent the only asset, I would say, that has, everyone can agree right now, has digitally native utility, right? Yeah. It doesn't matter what the community behind it, doesn't matter where it came from, if it's real, it doesn't matter. It, in a digital context, has utility. People will pay insane amount for it. Whoever has the most wins. It is liquid, it's liquid gold in the sense that it is value, right? Like that's how we see it. And people can very easily get to that. So not only from an adoption standpoint and teaching standpoint is it important, but from a what is going to lead this space, from a example standpoint and from a impetus standpoint, push us in that direction as we demand certain things, is data. So that's really at the core and the heart, and a huge part of how we, how you do distribute that value across these supply chains or value chains, whatever you want to, however, whatever industry you're in, and however, whatever perspective you come from, it's the same idea.
No, I love that. What inspired you to start the C3 Collective?
Yeah, great question. My inspiration really, the question is really my inspiration starting Fateful Youth, which is the lead project right now in the C3 Collective, because that directly resulted in the collective and the partnership that we made very early on. So the collective was very much a, hey, we have to brand a partnership, and I can talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But so it was very much the result of my time running this project in the industry, and how easy I found it was to, okay, well, if I'm already doing this, and if these people are already doing this, why wouldn't we do it for others who can't or won't and aren't going to, when the incremental work on our end is a fraction of what it would be for them. Right. So it was very much a result of what I was already doing. And so my inspiration, if we're talking to that specifically, if you had told me a year ago, actually, I quit my job a year and 2 days ago. And
oh, congrats.
Yeah. So it's pretty crazy to think that it's already been a year since I walked out. And I quit with nothing on the back end, like to be a full-time DGen, right? Which was a position I had never been in, because that's a very selfish, even though I didn't have selfish intentions. I wasn't doing anything productive for society, for anyone else. Nothing. And that was the biggest problem. It wasn't about, money or am I going to have a job? That didn't matter. It was why I was initially unhappy and searching to kind of find myself, was that surface level, just make money type, like all my purpose was. And so what was really incredible about it, though, is it reset me to baseline in terms of like, what do I want to do when I grow up? Right. And that's the best thing I love, like offering people. And because what I learned was everything I thought I wanted was completely wrong.
Right. Because once you get there, you're like, wait a second, it's not aligned with like my values.
Yeah. Like, why didn't I like these jobs? Why was I unhappy? All these questions that had plagued me for years and years and years, and what I considered a failure on my part, whether like a personal, professional, things that were broken in me that I needed to fix to conform to what I thought and what everyone else thought were incredible opportunities. What I realized going from, the financial industry and these more tech roles, and if you had told me that when left to my own devices, I would end up effectively on day-to-day being a community manager in the fashion industry, I would have laughed you off a bridge. Like I actually would have laughed you off a bridge, and I wouldn't have believed it. When you think about inspiration, when I first kind of started, grasped onto something and started running at it was Fateful Youth Project.
Yeah, which tell me more about that.
Yeah, I can just say a few words on that, because that's pretty powerful in terms of what inspired me because of how ambitious it was. And that project was essentially, so at the time, so it was the first PFP portrait photography collection that essentially introduced human generated scarcity rather than computer generated scarcity. So instead of an algorithm running through a bunch of traits and producing this value hierarchy based on rarity, we did that with real people. And instead of the computer, it was stylists and makeup artists and VFX artists. And there were 4 teams, and they essentially had to have strategies. Like, did they want to produce the most looks in this collection and have the most presence in terms of like value, or did they spend more time on less looks and have less to sell, but would the value be higher?
Right.
And then from
quantity versus quality, right?
yeah, and we actually tied them into at the contract level to each NFT of a look they produced, right? Because they shouldn't all be grouped into a basket and then we just pay the stylist over time, because their looks, they should be paid for what they produce.
Yeah.
And the value that whatever the community and whatever the consumers think is valuable, because it's also a data thing, right? Like what do people like, what don't they? And so if you go on like OpenSea and look up all the traits, and it's actually people's names, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you can click and then see all the looks by those names. And so like bringing them into the fold, that is such an underserved industry, I realized at the time.
I mean, giving them credit for being a contributor. It's not just one brand name label.
Yeah, they didn't even know they wouldn't even use a credit card to rent their looks. We were dealing in cash. And so that's from a technical perspective, that's where we're at.
I mean, they're stuck in Web 1.
Oh, no, actually. And that's when so this is when I started getting inspired. Like my inspiration is just like ramping at this point. And because I wouldn't have gone after the fashion industry. I didn't know anything about it. My friends would still laugh you off a bridge with how like Kelly works in the fashion industry. She's like a thought leader in the fashion industry.
It's turned fashion tech.
How underserved it was. And I was realizing, and what a greenfield opportunity there was, not only from a monetary perspective and how much we could give back and how much we could funnel back into the hands of these stylists and the hands of the players in this ecosystem, but also from a opportunity standpoint in ways in which we could take it. It was a completely greenfield. No one was doing even close. So we, got over our heads, I'll say, in terms of like, let's just do everything that's never been done before at one time. So simultaneous dual train drop on Solana and Ethereum. Let's do it. Which we did. And, this human generated scarcity, let's do it. People are still spending 2 ETH on pictures of poop, but you know what? They'll come around. Let's do it. Have a 70-person 2-day shoot. Let's do it. So we kind of went all in, and that kind of shows like
7-person 2-day photo shoot.
Oh yeah. With the scan truck, and the scan truck was on site.
Oh,
so
wow.
I can talk a little bit about them, but I mean, they only show up to like movies, and like we actually had a paper sign so that they could come off the set of Marvel to come on the weekend, because it was a weekend shoot, to spend the weekend on site, like, because each look had to be scanned right after the photo was taken. Right. So we have the scans, and over time we can render them, because that was to really drive home the utility and put this more forward leaning than just about the art, right? We're actually taking steps in the metaverse, and the scan truck was super into, they wanted to explore the space. They got asked all the time, and that led to a whole other thing. But I think that really captures my inspiration pretty well, because the passion which I pursued it and how hard I ran at what I now know were far too many complicated things for people to take in at one time is just really speaks to my inspiration and how inspired I am by these creatives and their plight, essentially, to get the proper recognition that they deserve. And then I realized how bad it was, from the sense of like, actually at the same time Nike was buying Artifact, right around the same time when we're releasing, and it was known that fashion and e-com and the opportunity there, and the big players were spending a lot of money doing really smart things moving into the ecosystem, and I'm sitting there watching physical fashion designers, everyone else, still dealing in cash.
Right.
And
there's
so
a gap in the market.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's hard to think of an artistic medium that's bigger because of the value prop of fashion on the other side.
Of course. It's how we express ourselves. We have to wear clothing, and we kind of want to rotate.
Art, we give utility to, right? Community, we just pile it on, and it's awesome, and it's brought so many incredible people together. But not the whole world is everyone says art is the utility. Okay, that is only going to take you so far.
I mean, people are going to collect like one piece of art for the rest of the year, but fashion is art. It's art that you wear on your body. There's a more frequency of transaction that happens in that industry compared to the art industry.
Yep. No, absolutely. And music and fashion will have digitally native utility.
Oh, I 100% agree. I interviewed a music DAO called
Oh,
Music.
awesome. You're
That's
doing
the-
music stuff too,
I
right? 'Cause
am,
that's
yeah,
super
yeah.
relevant. I think
I
we
do
talked about,
go-to-market strategy for a bunch of token launches. So yes,
yeah,
I am busy.
I'm obsessed, but I have to focus on fashion for now. And so that was what I realized. I was like, we're going to end up like these fashion designers, we're preaching all this stuff about what's going to be possible for them, but it's
Yeah.
not going to be possible. They can't build brand presence.
Right.
So that was, if they don't build brand presence, then we're going to end up actually in a worse from a commercial and monopoly and just, I guess, how our views and what we're advertised, it's going to be worse than a normal everyday life.
Right.
Because they're operating right now and getting leaps and bounds ahead of this industry who's still dealing in cash and thinks that this is a scam.
Right.
So that really scared me and got me motivated and passionate about running at really enabling fashion designers, physical fashion designers, regardless of notoriety, enabling them to build brand presence in a digitally native environment with like articles of clothing or lines or what have you that have digitally native utility. So that was really the big passion. And that's like the goal of Fateful Youth. It's kind of where Fateful Youth ends. So there's like the photos and the avatars, and we're doing metaverse integrations. And that's like the proof of concept really for the work stream that we're offering, that will be a platform that we're offering to physical fashion designers.
Yeah.
So that's where it ends. And now it's gotten to the point where that like I'm essentially trying to run at the fashion use case, because from a technical perspective, we have all the capability.
Sure.
It's just about, funding. We haven't sold, or we haven't raised funds to build this platform essentially. And so that's kind of where we're vectoring. But to bring it back to passions, like that's kind of Fateful Youth. And someone said what they say, it's this isn't a project, this is my life struggle. That pretty well captures it's like what I'm passionate about. It's what it's not, I'm not here because it's fun. A lot of times it's really fun, but a lot of other times it's a huge struggle that has to be overcome. And
it's work. It's the grind, the daily grind.
It's endless, but it's just because it's so exciting, right? And I'm so inspired by the space.
So now that you've graduated from Faithful Youth to the C3 Collective, what is the gap that you're trying to solve in the creator economy? And kind of like, where do you see, is it hard to convince the people in the industry? Because there's a lot of education, I imagine, that needs to happen first.
Oh, absolutely. So C3, and just to kind of quickly go into the backstory, essentially from the very early, I'm all about efficiency. And I was very involved in this. I'll say it was a failed PFP project called MetaVoicers, because their only utility was charity. And for better or for worse, it sucks. But honestly, in the NFT space, people don't care. Either their projects are doing some charitable thing. Charity cannot be the only utility. It will not be successful. You can build it in, like we have actually a charity written into our contract.
Like a percentage goes to charity might be a better model.
Yes, absolutely. But I noticed that you invest in people, and I noticed the leader, or the guy that took over, was good. And I didn't know how good at the time. I didn't know he was a virtual architect. I didn't know any of this about him. So, but I noticed he was good. And I essentially offered him, I knew he knew how to build a Discord. They had a Discord. So I pitched, hey, can we just merge together? We're very different projects, but from a value perspective, very the same.
Oh yeah.
And
the sum of the two is greater than the parts, for sure.
Exactly. And that really brings out what C3 ended up being, because we did that partnership. We had to brand it. We couldn't send invites to FYXMV. Did not work as a model for sending people invites to join a Discord server. So we had to brand it, and we branded it the C3 Collective, which stands for our values, community, culture.
What are your values?
Yeah, community, culture, and charity.
Great. I love that.
What that partnership became is really no different than what it was from the beginning, but it got so much more spelled out over time in terms of like what we could offer, what we wanted to offer. And, over the course of 6 months, I kind of realized two, when you talk about gaps was your question, and I realized two very distinct gaps. There's the gap between the education gap, as you say, and I'll also put time in that gap. So if you have a very knowledgeable real life artist, like take Hibikaza, for instance, they, and a huge following, passionate following,
Right.
and they drop NFTs into the ecosystem that are themselves art, much less all the utility. If they don't spend 20 hours a week in Discord and on Twitter, if they don't put in all this extra time in this community building in the current ecosystem, like, they will not be successful.
Yeah, their tokens will just die.
Yes, they will not. I mean, they won't sell at all.
Yeah.
It's crazy. You cannot take it for granted, the transfer of followers, or that the conversion between Instagram or TikTok and even Twitter to some extent, and actual sales. So that's kind of, one gap, is this just capability gap from big name artists that want to enter the space. They actually do want to enter, but they can't, because they have a fully functional business. That's great. Like, they don't have the time to spin circles in something that they think is not going to work, and it isn't going to work unless they put in the time.
Yeah.
The other gap, which we were positioned to fill, was, so when you think about just creators and collectors in the general NFT ecosystem that are already there, you have a bunch of art collectives, pretty much all the art collectives actually that exist there, even that are creator DAOs. They focus on raising money through an NFT sale to collectively buy either art they can't afford, or at a scale that they couldn't previously afford. And then they, based on obviously how many NFTs you own of theirs, or how much you've invested, value proportionally distributed to you. And that model is pretty much everywhere across chains. And it's what you see on Solana with the URS and Particles DAO, like all these different DAOs, and on Ethereum as well. It's this model, right? That model does not in any way connect collectors with creators, which is key in giving essentially membership to like one-of-one art, right? Because one-of-one art will never have the value a Bored Ape has, because of that. It's not a membership to anything. So the most famous artists will probably still, I mean, there's obviously some that have sold for insane amounts, but they will always struggle. When you buy a pack piece, he has 3 of the top 5 selling or grossing NFT sales of all time.
Yeah.
I don't think people know that's a membership in every way, shape, and form to a famous, like, you can't access his Discord. So we need to do that for one-of-one art. If art is to be the utility will also be membership, but we can make it more inherently have that.
So basically you're saying the more utility there is in a token, it really drives the value.
Yes. And that ruffles a lot of feathers, especially with one-of-one art gurus and people that are very much like, art is the only utility, blah, blah, blah. That's great.
I think there are many utilities.
There's
not just fashion, right?
Yeah, you don't have to go it alone, right? What if someone bought your one-on-one piece of art, and in your perspective, as the creator, you only put in the same amount of work. You made the piece of art. You didn't build this community and make a membership or anything. You're part of something like C3 Collective, but it's still art is the utility to you. But from the collector's perspective, what they just bought opens this world for them.
Yes.
And so that, and I have friends at this company called Anchain, which is a blockchain intelligence company. They similar to Chainalysis, except way better. And they use their chain analysis technology on the NFT space and on Twitter interactions. And you can see, it's really, really cool. Yeah. You can see the islands in just crypto Twitter between collectors and creators in terms of how much they interact. And that the top collectors, there's these little pockets where like crypto punks are green, Bored Apes are red, like they're literally colored because of how much influence they have. And you can see that there's a straight line that they've drawn where it's like, these are creators, these are collectors, and here's the only interactions that they have.
Interesting.
So that's another gap.
So you're creating a big bridge between those two parties.
And at a very small level at first. And the latter gap that I just mentioned, that's more of a pursuit. And to fund that pursuit on a base foundational like value layer, which a lot of DAOs don't have, it's what the business model is. The business model is solving the former that I mentioned, which is offering, you know, artists and creatives essentially a no-touch way to sell NFTs. And it's really about selling their art and selling products or commissioning public art, or there's a lot of different ways, but we are taking on that work because we can do it a lot easier.
Yeah.
We have like the resources, we've done it before from a technical perspective, from a community management. So we'll have like tiers. Right now, everyone's on the highest tier, which is we do everything. But it's the best because we get paid the most, right? But eventually there will be tiers as we build like kind of a playbook so they can buy more bite-sized pieces and just get certain levels of support. But that is a very immediate and long-term, when you think about the perpetual nature of royalties, service that we can offer and gap we can fill while kind of pursuing, you know, on a different level, this, hey, let's actually solve these challenges and these huge gaps in the ecosystem between market participants.
Totally. So you've created this DAO to build this community creator platform. Who have you been connecting with, and how would you describe the culture of the C3 Collective?
Yeah, that's another great question. So from who have I been connecting with? I have gone head first into the fashion space. Like when everything, and it's been incredible. And because I noticed that even before the bear market, I was like, when we were kind of looking at this real downturn and how it would impact the fashion space, it was like, oh wait, the money wasn't here before anyways. So it didn't change anyone. And that just shows the authenticity. If people are grinding in silence in the shadows for no near-term even prospects of profit, you know you're going to have the most authentic interactions possible, and that everyone is there for like the right reasons. So I've like totally immersed myself. So definitely connect with the fashion space the most through Fateful Youth. But that being said, for C3, it just recently, like very recently, emerged even as its own Twitter, kind of emerged from Fateful Youth. We were running things through the Fateful Youth account just for resource constraints. And so it just recently kind of split off. And, you know, I laid out the plan for actually launching it as a DAO. And bringing people in to make those decisions. And because all these projects aren't DAOs, but C3 is a DAO.
Right.
It makes DAO level. So it's a very interesting kind of dynamic that I got to design. And I think from an interactions perspective, the kinds of conversations I'm having and what I'm focusing on is, and I'm very happy with just a couple of recent people that I would consider what I call power members of a DAO. Power members are worth 20 to 100 normal members, depending, no joke, because people join DAOs for the stamp and like to get a possible token allocation. To get someone that is willing to work for, in the immediate term, free, is an art, and there has to be benefit for them and their mission. It has to be
value and mission, some core values that they really align with.
Yes, yeah. So those are the conversations I'm seeking out, is how do I spread this smartly in the broadest sense, but very targeted at individuals that are going to care. So I stood up a DAO Twitter space where we learn about, and this is the first Twitter series C3 itself is hosting, and we talk about, really it's a conversation. So there'll be education that I do in the beginning, but the point of it is, and what I've said is, I know, because I personally know them, that all the DAO alpha lives in the minds of the ETH-OGs and the gigabrains that are implementing their ideas. And it does not get shared with us. It doesn't matter if we're dating those people. It doesn't matter if we're like, in any way know them. We don't get to know. We get to sit here and struggle and try to figure it out and recreate the wheel. And we're not coming together to solve these issues, right? I can teach DAO infrastructure and all this stuff all I want, but this is a conversation. It's a debate right now. Yeah. And so I'm fostering those debates. And in the process of doing so, you obviously meet some pretty cool people.
Yeah. So, we're seeing the rise of DAOs right now. We're still in the very early stages. Tell us more about DAOs, like the structure, tokenomics, the whole ownership model, governance, what your roadmap looks like for C3.
I'm actually standing up 3 DAOs right now.
Wow. Okay. Someone's ambitious.
I did not choose this. I feel like it was like, oh, okay, well, there's 3 DAOs. You go for essentially because most DAOs aren't DAOs, first off. They are for profit in a lot of sense, or like they aren't structured as a DAO. They're a project that offers governance utility. It was a better way to classify them, because being a DAO implies certain infrastructure constraints, I would say, and governance is not just a couple votes at certain times. Being a DAO means you have taken your values and your mission and your SOPs and your processes and everything about who you are as a business.
Yeah.
And you've written it into code.
On a smart contract on the blockchain.
Yes. Yep. And that is what being a DAO means. And that is very, very rare to find. There are some amazing examples, but again, you don't really get to talk to those people. I get to read reports that come off them, but from let's have a discussion, it's very, very difficult. And there's also no problem with not being a DAO and having it, right? Like becoming a DAO is a whole spectrum. Like right now, C3 technically is not a DAO. It is.
I like that you said it's a spectrum, because if there's no one size fits.
There's no right or wrong
for the DAO, because the DAO can vote and choose and agree to a set of values, to a set of operating procedures, to the treasury and how things are managed and maintained. So it really is a spectrum.
Yes, and there's no and don't think that me saying it's not like an official DAO is even a bad thing, right? Like everyone's on the right track. At least they're trying, and at least they're bringing people into these conversations and giving ownership to these people. Like everyone's doing it right, and no one knows like the real right answer. It just needs to be understood, because obviously there are projects out there that hide under the guise. But in general, it's more about the process of moving towards what I'll call full DAO migration, which is what we'll do when I officially like sign over the multi-sig wallet. I make the wallet multi-sig. There's no one person in charge. Everything is voted on. All your infrastructure is stood up.
Explain multi-sig to some of the listeners who might this.
So super simple terminology that can make you sound really smart, it just means that there's multiple signatories on any one wallet. So if you think about your MetaMask wallet, every time you do a transaction, if you buy an NFT on OpenSea or any other transaction swapping tokens, you have to click approve and sign from your account that you made that transaction. All a multi-sig is saying that these 3 people or 2 people at a minimum, but it can be a lot more, everyone or certain percentage has to sign every single transaction.
It's like a shared wallet. It's like a shared bank account, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. It's a decentralized shared bank account. And obviously that was one of the first kind of DAO infrastructure things that needed to be created, because one person can't be in control of all the money. And
yes, we need accountability here.
Yes. Yeah. And so that checkbox, like first, which is funny because when you're in terms of DAO migration, like that's actually one of kind of the last things that gets done, which is really funny and not necessarily wrong. If you start something and you're creating something, it's a lot to no longer be in control of the flow of money or the handling of money. There has to be a lot of processes in place and systems and people around that to ensure that the people that are elected to take those roles and to be responsible for signing certain transactions. That's how everyone gets paid. That's how the token is allocated. It's everything. And so it's generally the last thing that happens.
Yeah.
And that would be kind of like more full DAO migration type stuff. But yeah, so I think that, in terms of C3 Collective, it's incredible to stand it up because I'm doing so in comparison with two other DAOs. The Raw DAO, which is the physical to digital DAO, and one that you talked to, the Fashion DAO. And I pretty much work very, very closely with Nico, / may work even with Nico on her actual thing. So I have a very close relationship with Nico.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and I was, in the Fashion DAO from day one, pretty much like run operationally most things, from like the finance and tech committee, education committee, stuff of that nature. So, and specifically, I'll be doing the tokenomics for both Raw DAO and the Fashion DAO. Yeah. But I also get to see how governance from the very early days are managed, and hierarchy and the lessons learned and things of that nature. And then standing up to C3 in conjunction with that, like checking my I guess opinions that became kind of that drive my decision making in terms of what I'm implementing, what tech stack, what I'm bringing people into, and as far as like influence in decisions, and what I'm not. Because again, like it's not a DAO yet. I'm telling people the tech stack we're using, unlike the Fashion DAO. Well, Fashion DAO's moving in that direction, but I'm telling people the tech stack that we're using. And once we start using it and we're, down the road, we can vote, we can change. We're not a 100-person bureaucracy. We're not the military. We're not anything. We're not locked into this, and everything's very modular. So we don't need to be scared about, we just need to go. We need to do something.
It's a living and breathing organization that will just continue to evolve over time. And, all the things can be voted upon. So you're not locked in stone from day one. And that's the beauty of this DAO, because it's owned by the collective. The voices of the members are actually heard, and those votes actually matter.
Yeah. And I think the really important thing is that they matter, but in a and what a lot of DAOs are realizing, and it was a very unpopular opinion when I initially had it, about hierarchy of decision making. Just because you're a DAO and you're decentralized does not mean it's a flat hierarchy organization. Doesn't have to mean that. There are a lot that choose to go that route, and struggle very, very hard. And there have been success stories, Ethereum to some extent, but look how slow things move. We're very behind, but it's a struggle, and it will always be a struggle. Especially when you're standing something up, there have to be decision makers.
In the beginning of a DAO, I feel like you need some strong leaders and co-leaders and co-ralliers to set the vision. And then once the DAO is established, then it could be more like just autonomous, right? But in the beginning, someone has to be the champion of it at the start.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, and when we talk about a spectrum, as you move away from kind of it being centralized to giving more of these decisions, like essentially power to the community. If you think about a startup, how long a startup has to have strong decision makers is a long time.
Yeah.
And you can be completely 100% decentralized and still have a hierarchy. You elect people into positions, and certain votes are routed through certain people. Certain people have certain signatory if tasks were completed in DAO infrastructure tools. So there's very good tools now. Exactly. Yes. And everyone is working through that right now, because everyone is backpedaling and going, whoa.
Everyone's trying to figure it out.
We can't just all day one sit there and be going as a group, every decision, like, let's put it to a vote. Half of us don't even know what we're voting on. Like, so it's really just becomes who is the best talker and can convince everyone of what to vote, when that's not the way to go. So it's funny, and it's really cool to watch everyone come to those realizations and say, okay, because everyone's really working through the hierarchy in a decentralized sense.
Right.
How can people overthrow, or how do we make this as low of a barrier to decisions being made by the community, while also having people be able to execute on things, frankly, as a member, I don't even need to know about. I don't want to know. There's a lot of stuff that shutting yourself off from information is
TMI.
Yeah, exactly. Just handle it. Handle it. I trust you.
Yes.
And so
We've
that
elected you into the position because we trust you to run operations or creative or whatever the role is.
Yeah. Here's the extent to your power. Here's how it can be taken away. Here's the KPIs that you have to perform against. And if you don't, you're automatically removed. That can all be codified. And so that is very important, I think, and something that, I mean, that's the biggest thing I think there is to work on, second only to tokenomics.
Yeah. What do you think are the benefits of running an organization as a DAO as opposed to a traditional org?
This is probably my favorite question, because conveying the importance of DAOs is extremely important. And, how I like to talk about it, because it's the same story I give people when I'm trying to convince them why DeFi is important, is really you have in the world, in all economic and social and political, actually, interchange, you have three things. Or three, I guess, groups. You have things, money, and people. The people need the money to buy the things, right? In a global sense. So they need to be able to exchange that money so that they can buy things. They need to be able to, and they have to run this system of money thing exchange, because they're the ones that need it and they're the ones that use it. NFTs give us the first opportunity that humans have ever had to irrefutably, in a trustless environment, assign ownership to anything. We can now, even if you live in a different country, I don't trust your ruler, it does not matter who you are. We can all come to an agreement that you own something, right? And that can be anything. Perfect. Question is solved. That's why, as a technology, NFTs might be the most important technological advancement that we've come across. Money and the exchange and what we all agree has value and how we're going to value these things, that's DeFi. And the exchange of that money in a decentralized environment that is transparent and immutable, all those things all fall into that money category. So who's going to run it? Someone still has to run it. So we're doing all these great decentralized things. We now have decentralized identity, or decentralized things, which can include identity. We have money that we can trade without any centralized power. Everyone can agree. Someone has it or doesn't have it. We can invest it. That's all great. But if that whole system is not managed also by people in a decentralized environment, where all that stuff is coming onto, each function of that society is coming onto a decentralized entity that's making sure that exchange happens. Then blockchain is a cool technology. And it's probably going to it'll be successful as private blockchains. Distributed ledgers have value, but that's all it will be. So, because
it requires mass adoption from the people for it to actually create
yes, and we'll get a lot of value on the way there, but that's a long way to say that DAOs and the offering of products and services, just as we do in everyday life, but in a decentralized manner and as a replacement to the business model. Now, I don't think we'll fully replace centralized entities, but in the pursuit, if you believe in decentralization, if you believe in any one of those categories, you have to believe in the success of the DAO model, which is also why I'm so passionate about making it better and improve.
That's the whole reason I'm doing this podcast. Is to educate the world about DAOs. I want to see DAOs like yours succeed.
Yes, and I appreciate that. And luckily it's hard to fail when you haven't taken money from an investor. And that's why this has been a very slow roll, and especially with the opportunities we have with Hibikozo and with Ether, all these projects that we've brought on so far, these were personal freelance projects that I was going to work and build small teams for and run for these people. So I essentially said, wait a minute, if there's a community willing to do this, like we can make this, but if the community is not really there on the other side and it's not going, we haven't reached a point and I can't get the support such that that value can be brought back in, then I'm just going to go this other route. So it's very hard for, groups like ours, or the Fashion DAO too, and Raw DAO, all are grouped in the category of we're working towards defining what success looks like. C3 kind of has that, but especially in these more broader category DAOs, what success looks like. But failure looks like, we're failing every day. We're here to fail and retry, fail and retry. And that's a really cool thing, is that DAOs in that category, and a lot of DAOs that are standing up, are in a place where it is pure learning, and I feel like value in what they're adding just by existing.
Yeah, let's talk about failure for a second. Sarah Blakely used to share that, growing up, her father would ask around the dinner table, every child, what did you fail at today? Because there's a lesson, there's a value, there's something to be learned. It's not something to be shunned or to be frowned upon, but, every quote unquote failure comes with a valuable lesson. What are some failures in the eyes of society that you've come across, but you've come up on the other side and have, gleaned a lesson or a gem from your experience?
C3 has a lot of failure ahead of it. It's pretty new as far as its DAO efforts, but Faithful Youth is no stranger to failure and overcoming failure, and checking if this is something worth doing and something worth pursuing, and if it is it in the current form in which it's in. And so that has driven, in essence, is the reason C3 is the way it is, and has driven a lot of lessons that can be assumed to be just as much as part of the DAO as if it had been around since last December. And I think that we did not do enough community building. We did not do, we were way too early for what was happening in the space, what was happening in the market. So timing was off, team size, support level. There were a whole bunch of, faculties that we didn't have, that I frankly didn't think we needed in place to sell a 800 supply collection, 400 on each chain. Really, even from being in the space for years at the time, didn't think it was necessary. There's enough, even my following, and I talked to, and there was enough interest that we heard like ourselves, that we really didn't need to focus on that. And we were so wrong.
Right. Community is the heart of everything, especially.
Yeah. And community also, we focused on onboarding very heavily. Well, that's great. And if a bunch of your friends and people you've onboarded come into the space and buy your NFT, you think they're going to sit in Discord and hype people? Are they going to
No.
They're not going to touch Discord.
No.
I mean, you can get them in Discord.
They're there to support you because they love you. They're going to join the community because of the people, not because of, some app that they can download.
Exactly. And the community hype and the energy, if it's already in the Discord and you bring a new person in and kind of drop them in, then they can love it, and they'll get into it, but they're certainly not people to look to start that. Right. And so that was another huge hindrance. So it's okay, yeah, we've made these sales, but where are those people? We didn't have the people that are going to go raid Twitter posts.
Yeah.
Even with buyer and a decent amount of buyers. So that brought us to a real grinding halt, because I completely overlooked that and did not factor in, just from my experience, is, factoring in the marketing effort push needed up front. And then really what you can kind of back off on and lean into the stakeholders doing naturally, because they invested, in terms of promoting and raising awareness and showing up to things. And so I would say that, just that handling, taught me so much about what makes a project successful. And, ultimately, and if we want to be very specific, lesson learned, actually not high level, if I was to do another project, or if I was of any size, I'm actually consulting for this one really cool ocean conservation project. I was oh boy, it's a charity project. I was here's how I would do it is, I mean, the whole thing is through partnerships.
Yes.
And it was actually a really interesting conversation in context with the team you're working with on the issuing tax write-offs, because, you know, if you have a value prop you can take to a project and make a partnership with them, they'll have to be doing raffles in their project to see who gets to buy your thing, right? And you can essentially take all, like, you put it all, and if you don't get this number of projects, you keep pressing until you do, or you rethink your strategy. So you've burned down all your risk before you really hit the market, or most of it. And it's also a proof of need, right?
Well, yeah, it's a great way to test the market.
Yeah.
Partnerships.
So that is the route I would take. And I can say that's a hard and fast lesson. Then you have the bigger lessons, like how you deal with failure personally, how you deal with uncertainty and doubt. And I don't know if you've read Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, but the first rule is, you know, stand up straight with your shoulders back, and talks about lobsters.
Okay, I'm sitting with my shoulders back now.
Yeah, and it's all about confidence, and it talks about how lobsters actually, and they're very similar to humans in that when you're defeated, if you go to battle and you lose, it actually makes you less capable to win the next battle from a brain chemical perspective.
Right.
So overcoming being a small lobster, it was one of the biggest things. Like, how do you perform? How do you act? How do you keep going when you are not mentally equipped to do so? Recognize that. And I think that those are invaluable lessons that, you know, I carry with me, and the people that were involved bring with them to the table every day. And just the perseverance is, and the motivation that an impact a single person, you know, you're trying to market to so many people and have such a reach, when one person can make all the difference.
Wow. One person. Well, you mentioned community. I want to know, what do you think is the heart of building community, right? Since it's such a core, you know, need in, you know, beyond the tools, you know, it's really the people behind it, the genuine connections we build with the tribe, with the shared values and goals and aspirations. And when those humans come together, that power of the collective is stronger than the self. So tell me more about the community that you're building, and what do you think is the heart of it?
So the heart is definitely the purpose that you all share. You're not only on a similar wavelength, but everyone shares a passion. And typically that's a passion for something that's wrong, right? Because that's driving change.
Yeah.
And it's driving them to want to change something and work towards that. And so in the sense of C3, and one of the reasons that waited so long for it to come out as, you know, its own DAO and really, you know, try to build members and define what all this is because we need to define and get people that, one, really, you know, bound that purpose, right? And, you know, I finally think that we've done that.
Wow.
And as we've gotten in the past just couple of weeks, like a couple people that are so passionate about, you know, the ability to enable creators leveraging joint efficiency, like joint resources and the efficiencies created.
I mean, why not collaborate? You're going to literally double your following. And
exactly. Every project you bring on could add how many people to your community? So if you brought another project on, they're dropping into a community of
already exists, right?
Yeah.
And it's growing.
It's not that much effort.
Yeah.
So
it makes a lot of sense, everything you're describing here.
Yeah. And it's thank you. And it's good to see people so passionate about it. And like, also you can tell when a community when they're latching onto those things, and what's really going to make them strong is, like, we have an idea incubator. We have a public and private one in our Discord. And seriously, I've had to rein it in. I was like, okay, this is awesome, people, but we cannot spend the entire community call solely pretty much pitching me on their, they are great ideas. I have I post stuff in there to hold the ideas. But it's really cool because what it allows me to internalize and like changes the kind of go forward plan and roadmap for the DAO is like, okay, well, you know what we probably need is that when we'll be paying for completing tasks in a beta token that will, when we launch our token, convert 1-to-1. But in the near term, the beta token has immediate value in governance and voting through this platform called Upstream. And Upstream, you have to vote on everything. You pretty much have to, it's like a DAO in a box. You have to define everything, even things you wouldn't think of, infrastructure stuff, because you have to set it up such that people can come on and all the proposals are made within parameters. So you set it up once, you can change those, but they have to be voted on. Everything after that has to be voted. You have to vote every single member to get an account with Upstream. Goes to a community-wide vote. And so it's really cool. It's like focused on tokens and governance, which is awesome because it gives immediate value to, if someone cares about the mission and how DAO resources are being allocated, it's going to give immediate value to that beta token in this sense. When it's part of no liquidity pool, there's no money tied to it yet. It's like a tracker almost, but it has value. And so seeing all these ideas and how passionate people are about, oh my gosh, like we have this technical capability and we have all these minds. I want to pitch this idea. Well, okay, there needs to be mechanisms in place where people are voting for how we manage resources, right? In addition to what we've already kind of planned, but this clearly has to be like an important part of what we're doing, because this is really what's firing people up. And it's all within lines of our values and our general roadmap. So giving them that capability to be owners and impact the future of C3 has been one of the biggest, like, I think what's brought people and power members in.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Well, now that this DAO is formed, what would you say are the long-term goals of the C3 Collective? Do you plan to be more of a platform curator? Are you also obviously building some projects of yourself? And how do you see these projects getting funded? I think that's a question that a lot of people are interested in.
Yeah, great question. So where I see myself is, I want to be in a place where I can experiment with utility on the fringes of the creator economy and essentially, build out the supply chain use case, but for fashion designers where they're pre-selling essentially NFT futures of clothing lines to crowdfund this expensive scanning technology that we're offering them, that we're working on making cheaper and more efficient. But like those kind of implementations that are very, very, for niche artistic mediums, which we're already, targeting, and that kind of bounds us and actually gives us really important kind of scope because it attracts certain people that are really interested in like more innovative and leaning forward. So I want to be in a place where C3 is, and have a lot of motivation to get it to a place where it is pretty self-sustaining in the sense of it does have the governance mechanisms and the voting mechanisms and the people in place that are guiding certain functions moving forward. And I can take, even if it's a very, even if it's still a high level role, I can really like experiment with like that really excites me. And C3 sets up the platform and, doing that long term and having a place where you can do that. And that's like not only allowed, but, encouraged. Yeah. Is really exciting. And I think that would open, it just makes it the open-ended in terms of what you can create and what you can do. For the funding question, that's a great one as well. So generally, and that's also a hard one because, so for like currently the projects that we took on, Faithful Youth is going out for funding for the fashion use case. But the like Ether 11, which is the luxury jewelry brand, and Hibikozo, these are, and one of the reasons that it was so interesting to me, not only in what they do and how they, because I always like, why do you want to sell NFTs? Open-ended question. Never had a conversation with them, but I just need to hear the answer. And I've said no a ton of times to tons of artists. And what's really incredible is the best answers I've ever heard to that question was they didn't know anything about the space, nothing. And what they said could have been a Web3 pitch.
Wow.
It's incredible. And that's also how I take like consulting clients. Like I'm not doing DAO origination and building this unless you're, and I don't need to tell you anything about the space. You don't need to use any words about the space. Why? Why?
That is so important.
And if you can't answer that question, then we're not building to build, and we're not doing things for no reason. So that was really important in bringing in, but also important was that these were already established businesses. So they're not going out to fund. We're not launching collections for people. Right. Or these like 10K projects. We're not launching a Psychedelics Anonymous project or this project. We're launching individual artworks like Heavy Kozo or very small scale, more one-of-one type art. Now it has utility. We're experimenting with utility, and there's all these cool things that we're doing around it. But the funding for each project isn't something we've really talked about yet because it's not really a goal of ours. Now it will be awesome, but don't want to put these restrictions on when we do launch a full token. So that depending on the route we go, the funding for that, whether that's because you can consider people that invest in an ICO or whatever, that's funding. If that money can be used in the economy and ecosystem that's created, and there's a whole, incentive structure. There's also going to be an NFT membership sale, and that kind of drives when I was talking about the second gap with the creator and collector, the DAO membership or the clearances, essentially all the money that goes to those will go towards that effort and not towards this DAO stuff. It'll go towards like buying art and incentivizing that connection between the collectors and creators. Yes. So the money that C3 would be raising would be through a token sale, and it would be amazing to have a system designed such that and be moved in the direction of being able to provide that funding ourselves if it was voted on, because that would be really cool.
That's incredible. I love what you're doing to connect the creators and the collectors, and you're shaping culture. I mean, that's what you're doing through these projects. So how can people join the DAO? How can people follow the C3 Collective?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's super open Discord. We just stood up the Twitter, as I said. So the Twitter is just at C3 Collective _, but it will come up. We're also on LinkedIn. It's, I think, the only C3 Collective. It comes up pretty quick. You can also go to creatorscollective.xyz. So that route's like C3 Collective does too. And from there, we have like all the information on, the Discord is insanely built out, very, very heavy on information first, because it was before we had the website and it was very confused. We had to make it very clear. This is Faithful Youth. This is MetaVoicers. This is Ether 11. It's also very minimal Discord. So it's used for like operational conversations, which I think bounds it. This isn't a hype project. So if you want to be on the next hype train, it's not the place to be. Right. If you want to make an impact and do really cool stuff and have conversations with super interesting people and learn. That's another thing I thought this would be way more of a selling point. I think I just need to work on my pitch. But, to me, the prospect of being involved in DAO origination proceedings is invaluable. I mean, I was always told, if you want to learn about the blockchain space, join a DAO. Just put in the work, join a DAO. You'll learn everything you need to know about swapping tokens and NFTs and everything. And I didn't listen. I was like, I'll go out and struggle along on my own, reading individual papers, like not learning by doing. And I don't even know where I would be today if I had actually just listened and joined a DAO.
Well, because you learn so much faster with the community, right? This is why we go to class, we have school, we have peers, we have people to bounce ideas off of.
So I'm here saying to people like a huge, like we are offering, and DAOs with like a business model and assets to sell, like things to do, right? We're not just spinning wheels. There's things to do and we need help to do it. And on top of that, you're going to be one of the most highly skilled, like, of the entire labor force, right?
Yeah.
Anyone that can put tokenomics engineering and claim that title while requirements are low, we will get you there. Will be like the most highly sought after job. Because tokenomics engineering is going to drive organizational design because of how powerful it is and the incentive mechanism in the game theory. So
first heard on this podcast. Okay, we're crazy.
Yeah, it's just it's so powerful. It opens so many doors, and at the very least, you'll learn something new, and something will sound exciting somewhere else, and it will vector you in a direction you want to go.
Yeah.
And so I can definitely say that this collective offers you the opportunity to really dive headfirst in a no risk environment. You can't fail personally. There is no such thing.
Yeah.
Right? That's why we're all here. So if that appeals to you, then it may be something to check out.
That's amazing. Well, you answered the last question about what's your advice to people who are just getting into Web3.
Yeah, that would be it. Join a DAO.
Yeah, just join a DAO. Well, what is your personal motto that you live by, or a quote that you want to leave us today?
Yeah, so I've only had one since I ever first heard that question, and it still applies today, and I've never needed a new one. There's no such thing as overachieving. There's only underachieving and meeting potential.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah, so I pretty much lived by that my whole life. When everyone would call me an overachiever in like high school and stuff, and like my parents would tell me that. I don't know where they got it. They definitely didn't come up with it, but I like that quote.
I love that quote. It's like, it shouldn't be a bad thing, right? People say, "Oh, you're such an overachiever," because I get that a lot too. And
There's no such thing.
There's no such thing. And I wear that with a badge of honor because I get to define what that means. Yeah.
Yep.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for being part of this podcast. I loved our conversation. I love what you're building, bringing creators and collectors together, shaping culture. Super excited to hear more and to stay in touch and to see what else the C3 collective, unfolds.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. And yeah, I'm excited for future conversations we have. And yeah, excited for anyone that's interested to join in, and we can all learn together. So I appreciate you.
Learning and growing together in Web3.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us this week on Season 1 of The DAO Factor. Follow The DAO Factor on Twitter and YouTube to watch videos of our podcast, where we'll be dropping a new video every week featuring key leaders of DAOs, community builders, and leaders in Web3.